What is going on, gurus? My name is Nick, and I am back here today to discuss building your own pseudo apps. What I mean by that is you don't actually have to build the integrations, you don't have to publish it to an app host or anything like that. This is just hitting API calls, doing one off API calls. But of course, we can chain these in one playbook to do lots of different API calls if we want to, manipulate that data, and then perform some kind of action to get different results back. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to use this new integration. It's fairly new integration. Previously, it was in the FN utilities integration. Now we have broken that off into its own integration called REST API functions. So what we're going to use this integration for is actually doing our API calls without having to have some kind of custom integration built. We could just use this to do those one-off API calls. So first, let's go ahead and dive into getting this installed. Of course, you're going to come out here, you're going to download this, and you're going to jump over here and install it into your SOAR platform. I'll go ahead and post it up here in the top right. If you are looking to understand how to install the app, you can jump into there. I've already done a video on that, so take a look at that video and that'll help you get it installed. When it comes to the configuration for this, a lot of times you're going to need to do different auth on your different applications that you're connecting to. Obviously, you want to keep those secret. So what we're going to do is we'll jump into the configuration file here. And then down here in my config, what we're going to do is we're going to see that we have this ability to actually add the auth header up here in our config file. So that's exactly what I did. I went and created a variable called SOAR auth, and then I created a encoded auth key. Now, the way that we're actually going to create that encoded auth key specifically for SOAR, of course, every application is going to be different on how it's going to do this. But since we're using basic auth for SOAR, what we're actually going to do is we are going to first go get your API key. That is simple enough. We would just go to the administrative settings here. From here, we're going to be in the users section. We're going to go to our API keys, and we're just going to create an API key here. For this instance, I created this API key down here called testing the API, and I just gave it full permissions, but of course you can restrict those permissions however you would like. And once you get that created, it's going to give you that key ID and then the secret as well. What you're going to want to do for the key ID and secret is actually we need to base64 encode those together. So the way we're going to do that is by running a quick command on our resilient box to actually encode those together. All right, so this is the command that we're going to run. I don't care if you guys see my code. This is my own private lab, so of course, it's not going to leak anything for me here. But this is exactly how we do this. So we're going to do an echo -n, and then we're actually going to provide the key with a colon in the center and then a secret and put those in quotes on either side there. And then we're going to pipe that into a base64. What's going to happen then is we're going to get the value back here that is going to be our base64 encoded username and password essentially. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use this to actually create our auth token. Now what we're going to do is let's jump back into our configuration for the app itself. All right, back here in the auth config, what we're going to do is we're going to create our variable. We are going to create we're going to create the auth variable. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create our secret. The secret is just going to be adding a new secret over here. You click that add button, you add a secret name, which is going to be your new variable name. And then you're going to add your secret value. That's going to be that value that we just got back. You might have to post that response into a notepad and remove any line breaks from it and make sure that you don't have any extra spaces or anything like that in that, or in your command that you ran to get the base64 encoding, make sure you don't have any spaces in there as well, or that might create a bad base64 encoding of that auth token. Once you do that, we're going to come back here. We're going to paste that secret value in here. If you're on version, I think it's 48 maybe is when we introduced this, you can encrypt it or just save it as a secret if you're not at that version, and then go ahead and create that. I've already gone ahead and done that here. I've got this encoded auth key here, and I have created my auth key and added that to my auth key afterwards here with my variable that it created for me. After that, you can go ahead and test and config this, and then go ahead and save it and push those changes. As you can see, I've already come in here and saved that and pushed that config out. So once you got that config there, and of course you can add as many variables as you want, then what we're going to do is we are going to jump into the playbook building. All right, over here in the playbook building, what we've got is I created this playbook called Get Stored Users. It's a fairly simple playbook, but I'm just going to go and collect all of the users for this system and then print them out in a readable fashion. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to dive into this playbook. Of course, we're going to start our playbook building like any other. You decide your activation type and where you want to activate this from. Any conditions or forms that you're going to create, you're going to go ahead and do that here as well. Then we're going to jump into using the call REST API function that we added when we installed that integration. From here, what we're going to do is we are going to go into our script, and a lot of this code that I've got in here is just from the initial install. So if you're interested in actually seeing all of this documentation or anything like that, all you have to do is go look at the default playbook that was created when you installed this integration, and you're actually going to see a lot of what I'm showing you here. It's very super helpful, very well documented, so definitely take a look at that. All right, so first things first, what I did was I created a SOAR FQDN, and then I added my SOAR fully qualified domain name there. Then what I did was I grabbed my org ID, which is 201 in my case. And then from there, we need to apply our headers. The headers is where we are actually going to apply that authentication. So first things first, we're going to have to set the content type to application/JSON. If you are having any problems where you're getting some kind of 500 error repeatedly or anything like that, there's two things to look for. First, make sure that your content type starts with a capital C and then the rest is lowercase. They are working on making this not case sensitive anymore, but as of the recording of this, this is case sensitive, so just be careful on that. And then the next section you're going to want to make sure that you do is that your auth key is working properly. The way that you can tell that is actually in the logs. You should be able to see the output of that log key in there. So go ahead and take a look at that. But what we're going to do is we're going to set authorization is equal to a string that starts with the word basic with a capital B, space. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do something that you do in a Jinja template to identify a variable, which is going to be the open bracket, SOAR auth, close bracket, close bracket. And by bracket, I do mean squiggly bracket, whatever you want to refer to that as. So what this is going to do is when it gets processed, it's going to take the variable that is passed along, and it is actually going to grab that and decipher that into that key that we just created. From there, we can do things like if we need to add a filter or something with the payload, we can do that. We define what that filter is up here. And then down here, we actually start to define what our actual code is. So down here, we are going to say which URL we're actually going to. If you're interested in actually doing something where you're making some automations for SOAR, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, what we're going to do is I highly recommend you jump out to our API documentation. Now, the way to get to that is actually by going to your menu up here in the top right, going down to the help and contact, which is going to bring you to another page where you have two API tools available to you in the standalone version, of course. And you're going to have the REST API reference, and you're going to have the interactive REST API. I usually go to the interactive REST API because it just has a lot more features there. From here, now that we are in the interactive REST API, now what we're going to see is all of the different APIs that we can actually hit for SOAR. So if you scroll through this, you can do a lot from the back end of the platform. But once you decide what you want to do, such as grabbing maybe the users like I did, come all the way down to the org user rest for mine, since we're just grabbing the users. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this post request here to just perform a quick query and grab the users from the system. This is going to pull back all of the users and all of the users' data, and then we can actually do some parsing back in the product, in the in-product scripting. So that's where we got the URL and defined what that URL was going to be. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to define what kind of query this is. I just mentioned that this was going to be a post, so we'll put post in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have to make sure that we import JSON. And then what we're going to do is we are going to do a JSON dump of our, or dumps of our header up here, and also the filter. And if you're doing a payload of the payload, this is just going to convert that into a string format. And then we can actually take that JSON string format and hand it off to the application to process this properly. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set that I don't want to verify because I've got a private cert on this, self-signed cert. And then I'm just going to let this section of the code do its own thing. This is going to be adding what I defined up here. Of course, if you just want to add these directly, you can do that, but this was part of that base coding, so I just let the base code do itself. If you're looking for documentation on what all I just went over, highly recommend that you go down here into the bottom section and actually look this over. This is where I kind of read up on how this integration was supposed to work and got an idea of exactly how to use this integration. So if you're hitting any problems, definitely take a look here. And then, of course, reach out to that community, which will be linked down below. If you're trying to do anything that you're struggling with, the community should be able to help you out. Or, of course, if you want to drop a comment down below on this video, I can try to help you out as well. The next thing to talk about too is if you are trying to interact with something that maybe is using OAuth or something like that, it does have a section down below that actually talks about defining your OAuth authentication. So you can also use the REST API function to actually do OAuth authentication before you actually hit the REST API that you're trying to hit to. All right. After we've gone ahead and defined all of that, we're going to, of course, after we save that, name our output. After we've named that output, then we're going to jump over into our post-process script. This is where we can manipulate all that data that's coming back. It'll show you kind of here on exactly what the results are going to kind of look like. Now, it is important to understand that the way to get to these results is actually through that result variable that we just commented. So we're going to name that result, and then we can verify that it was successful. If it was not successful, we can of course do something and choose our description there, this one's just going to leave a note of what the reason is for the failing. And then if it was successful, what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate that data. If you're trying to get into these results here, it is important to remember that you're going to have the default success criteria, and then you're going to have some additional information in there. But to get down to this level where we're dealing with these results that we've got defined here, what you're going to look for is actually the result content, and then we can start actually filtering through this information here, these different options here. It is important to remember that I am pulling back the JSON response and then manipulating the data within that JSON response. But of course, you could get text back. You could get all kinds of different responses back based on what your REST API is actually going to hand back to you. So keep that in mind when you're parsing through yours. Maybe you want to post the entire response as a note first, so you can see what the results are going to look like, and then decide from there how you actually want to parse through that data. For us, what we're going to do is we are just going to create an empty user list. We are going to define each of the users by parsing through each user that it returned and actually appending the display name to that user's list. Finally, we're going to post this as a rich text note back by joining that list together with a line break. So let's go ahead and dive in to see how this playbook looks when it actually is run. All right, here in one of my test incidents, what we've got here is we're going to run this playbook and it's going to post a note back like I showed earlier. So the notes and attachments section has already been selected. We're already in here. What we're going to do is kick off this action by running the get SOAR users playbook that I was just showing you. As we can see, this kicks off successfully. We can see it's running here and we shouldn't see another error pop up here. And no, we do not. And here are all of the users that I have in the system. Now, of course, I just did something very simple by posting these back as a result. But we could add things like maybe pulling a user down and updating permissions on a user or something like that and actually perform some kind of automation that way. And then that allows you to actually build that pseudo playbook without actually having to go and build the code yourself, test that code to the point where you've got an integration built now, publish that integration, or even just publish it to your own app registry. And then what we're going to do is from there, we wouldn't have to actually go ahead and deploy this as its own special app. The only thing we're doing is actually building a playbook. So I definitely recommend taking a look at this integration because this integration will allow you to do a lot of useful functionality, whether this is things within the platform that you would like to be able to automate, or even reaching out to things that don't currently have an integration for the SOAR platform, but you want to be able to integrate with. All right. And with all of that said, if you have questions, like I said earlier, drop a comment below, drop a comment in the community. We will be glad to help you out. I hope this video has been beneficial to you so you can see the capabilities of the SOAR platform and how you can build automations without actually having to go build a full integration, just using the playbook capabilities and one function to be able to perform those automations. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and post a comment down below telling me the best part of this video. If you don't like the video, give me a thumbs down. Tell me what I could do better to improve these videos to make sure that you're getting the content that you want and that you need for your environment. Because that's ultimately what the goal is for this channel, is to make sure that you gurus know how to perform the best functionality for your environments to make sure that you can get these automations done and get yourselves protected. And with that being said, I hope to see you gurus next time. See ya.